Yerushalayim. I can't explain, but I've never felt this way. I gotta kiss the ground 'cause I'm overwhelmed. I'm in love with this ancient city. There's something in the air I never felt anywhere. Tell me why I'm feeling more alive with every step I take as I make my way through the heart of the holy city. I touch the wall of stone like it's a part of my bones. With a gentle kiss I know I finally found my way home.
The Temple Mount sits in Benjamin's territory on what was once a threshing floor, bought by King David, so there should have been no dispute over who owns it. It's Mount Moriah, the same place Abraham offered Isaac in obedience to Yahweh. Some stones at the southwestern corner date back to Solomon's original temple complex. Others are from the Hasmonean era, but most are from Herod the Great's structure. Here's the pinnacle, from which the trumpets announcing the beginning and end of the Sabbath were sounded, where Yeshua was tempted, and where his brother James was killed. This anchor stone is all that remains of an archway, seen here from another angle. It once supported one of the main stairways up to the royal stoa, part of Herod's additions to the Temple Mount. In Second Temple times, the priests traveled from their homes across the central valley, called the Teropian, by way of a bridge, so they could stay undefiled by contact with anyone else along the way who might be ritually unclean. The bridge was right where those buildings are now. Its final supporting arch is still there inside. In a tunnel behind it that runs right along the western wall through that valley, which is now mostly filled in, we can see up close the stones from Herod's construction with their distinctive bordering bevel. They used no mortar, but you can hardly even slide a written prayer between them at this section closest to the Holy of Holies.
And not only were they incredible artisans, look at this rock. That's the beginning, and that's the southern end. 45 feet, 13 and a half meters long. When put in place, this rock was 12 feet tall, 3.3 meters. And the western wall is 15 feet wide, 4.6 meters wide. Now that makes one solid block of limestone that weighs 628 tons. And this isn't the only block that's so large. As we head north, we're going to pass 3 others. This is called the Master Course. You have come face to face with something that no modern engineer can explain. The largest cranes that we've got could not move this block. So how did they do it 2,000 years ago? Modern man meets the incomprehensible. Sometimes I think that's a rather refreshing feeling, that we can't explain and understand everything. Welcome to Jerusalem, a city beyond normal scientific ways of thinking about things.
While the temple stood, this was an open-air street. Here they like to call it Wall Street, and we can still see its surface. The street level was lined with shops that took advantage of pilgrims' enthusiasm by overcharging for what they had to have.
Feeling repair! Bring it to feeling here. I'll fix them up for you.
No one disputed Yeshua's right to chase the money changers from the temple. The kings in the line of David had always been able to rule on certain aspects of what went on there. Restoring his father David's throne is what Yeshua was about. But he also knew that in Israel, the priests have a higher position than the king. So he teamed up with Yochanan the Immerser, who was a rightful priest, in trying to restore this proper order, intending to turn the highest authority back over to the priesthood when everything was secured from outside threats. But Herod imprisoned, then killed Yochanan, here at the Machairos fortress in what is now Jordan. The only Pinchas of his generation, who had the zeal for Yahweh's jealousy, was now gone. And who else could Yeshua feel confident about turning the temple over to? Yeshua went across the Jordan, under another potentate's jurisdiction, to regroup and find a new strategy. But of course he came back to Jerusalem for the feasts, and had to confront the elite who had bought the priesthood when the Romans sold it to the highest bidder. And they were powerful. The corrupt system brought Yeshua to trial, here at what archaeologist Shimon Gibson thinks is the more likely site of Pilate's judgment hall, as it was part of Herod's palace, over which the present-day citadel was built. Yeshua was executed north of the altar, outside the city, at a cliff known as the Place of the Skull, or Golgotha. "40 years later, the Romans burned the shops, and, as he predicted, not one stone of the temple was left on top of another, which is actually the Torah's remedy when a house becomes irreparably defiled. These are some of the stones that were once part of the temple.
It's really impossible in the modern mind to picture the horror, the devastation that people must have felt with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Because of course in the ancient world, if you were defeated by someone, it meant that their god, or gods, were stronger than yours. What hope was there for the people to return when the ultimate symbol of our nation was utterly destroyed?
All that remains intact is the retaining wall. For centuries, Jews could only come to this wall one day a year to pray for the city's restoration. Thus it came to be known as the Wailing Wall. On this model at the Israel Museum, the red arrow points out where it is in relation to what was here. The Western Wall Plaza now serves as an outdoor synagogue, but it's just a remnant of what once was. Neil Armstrong said that standing on these steps to the temple was more exciting than walking on the moon. But right now they lead nowhere but to closed up gates. A glaring reminder that while much has been accomplished, the restoration of Israel is far from complete. For without this sanctuary, there are many parts of the Torah that still cannot be carried out. And while the Jews are back in the land, the rest of the tribes, which Yahweh also promised would return, are not. But the writings of the prophets are full of the hope that one day all that has been lost can be restored if we wholeheartedly turn back to the way we forsook. The Temple Institute is actively making the implements for a third temple, so they'll be ready to restart the moment the door opens. Reuven Prager is a Levite who is restoring many ancient Israelite ways. In ancient times, pilgrims would gather in city squares like this and travel up to Jerusalem as a whole community. As they went up, they sang psalms of ascent. The one we're going to hear now is number 126. What it says is that when the exiles returned to Zion, as if in a dream, the Gentiles recognized that Yahweh had done great things for them. But then it switches to first person. You have done great things for us. It's not just about somebody in a vision of what could be. It's an ongoing story that we're meant to be part of. Imagine the excitement of being able to once again make such pilgrimages and fulfill the Torah's commands so much more fully than we now can through our memorial celebrations and even reenactments. It may not look exactly like the last time. When David wanted to express his gratitude for the great things Yahweh had done for him by building a temple, Yahweh said, in essence, "Did I ever ask for a house?" A tent, yes, so he could dwell tangibly among his people, like he did at the very beginning in the Garden of Eden. That's what he really wants, an inviting, intimate place to meet with him, not grandeur or anything particularly spectacular. The tabernacle could be restored even while the political issues remain unresolved. A tent also better expresses the kind of people Yahweh wants us to be, ready to pull up stakes and move on when his cloud moves. When Yeshua called into question the religious practices of his day, he wasn't trying to break any continuity with the original commandments or start his own new religion. He just wanted to remove the clutter so we could all get back to the original intent the Creator had for his people. And that's not a mystery, locked away somewhere across the ocean. It's all written down plainly, and it boils down to loving one another in an orderly, sustainable way. The Torah tells us what's most effective at accomplishing that. The community, where we can learn to live it out by getting the tailored feedback we need, is the fast track to making our excitement about Israel fruitful. It will require some adjustments in lifestyle, but the promised land is for those who want it badly enough.